Welcome into OutKick the show. I'm your fearless leader, Clay Travis. I hope all of you are having fantastic Mondays wherever you may be across the country or around the world. We've got the OutKick show that is now on FS1, Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern. Reminder for that right off the top. Met a lot of you at my speech up in Michigan on Mackinac Island. I will share a portion of that speech. Some people not very fond of the way that I dress or the things that I say. We've got some hate mail, which has been a staple of my career for the past 20 years. We will dive into all of that. But as we do every single Monday, college football reaction time, I encourage you to go read the starting 11. Takes a lot of time to write thousands of words every Saturday night late or every Sunday morning early. It is up for sure Sunday before the NFL games kick off. You just go to OutKick.com. You don't have to follow me. And you can see all of my takes from the weekend that was in college football. And so we start off with, I've still got Miami as the best team in college football. The Florida Gators tried to keep it close, managed to cut it to 13-7 midway through the actual game. And you guys can put up the college football top 10 as I talk here if you want to. You can see I've got Miami number 1 overall. The storyline coming out of this game is that Florida has no offense. And I'll dive into this top 10, but it hasn't really changed that much. Let me tell you about the top 10 here while it's up on the screen. Leave it up, guys. You can see I shifted things around a little bit. In particular, I dropped LSU. You say, well, LSU, they had a blowout win against an inferior opponent. I get it. I dropped LSU because that win over Clemson, and I'll talk about this, really doesn't look very good now. And that win over the Florida Gators really doesn't look very good either. And in fact, a little bit of an early preview. These picks will probably be up later tonight. I think that Ole Miss is going to beat LSU in Oxford. I'm not sold on LSU's ability to score with Lane Kiffin's Ole Miss team. I think LSU is going to get the win. I elevated Indiana. We'll talk about this in a bit. I think Kirk Cignetti, I'll put myself in this category. We have not been talking enough about him, and I'll talk about the way that all of this process plays itself out. Vanderbilt scored 70 points. People said, oh, Clay, how do you have Vanderbilt number 2 overall? Win on the road over South Carolina. Looks pretty good based on the way South Carolina played against Mizzou. They won by 24. And the win over Virginia Tech. I know they fired Brent Pry. 70 points against Georgia State. That's an FBS team. There used to be months, there were many of them, trust me, I've known, where Vanderbilt could not score 70 points. Florida State win over Alabama, continues to look good. Oklahoma got the win over Auburn. We'll get into that game in a moment. Ohio State didn't play. A&M did not play. Texas Tech, I elevated them. That was a beatdown they put on Utah. Rice-Eccles Stadium, hard place to win. To me, you have to be impressed with what you saw from Texas Tech. And like I said, Georgia still kind of hanging around there. We'll see what happens. I'll be on the road this weekend hanging out down in Athens for that game. But let's come back to Miami and Florida. In the first half, Florida had 32 yards of offense. Somewhere around 60-some-odd yards, I think that DJ Lagway threw for. They basically didn't trust him after he threw 5 interceptions on the road against LSU. And the Florida defense is really good. This offense is completely unacceptable. They're averaging 11 points a game in the last 3 weeks. You can't beat anybody averaging 11 points a game. Now you've got Texas coming up, and then you've got a road game against Texas A&M. It's a bye week. Billy Napier evidently not going to be fired. I think it would have already happened if he were going to be fired on this bye week. But you've got Texas and Texas A&M the next 2. Texas is at home. A&M's on the road. Then you still have Georgia, Tennessee, Ole Miss, and Florida State on the schedule too. I think 4-8's likely. And I don't see how in year 4, 4-8, 5-7, whatever the number ends up being, I don't see how you can treat this as in any way acceptable. Miami, flip side, I've got them as the number 1 team in college football. and they pulled away late, dominated this game throughout. Hurricanes in a couple of weeks, I believe, have to go on the road against Florida State. Feels to me like Florida State and Miami are clearly the top two teams in the ACC. Clemson has fallen off. And that's why I told you that I dropped the victory over Clemson. Doesn't look that impressive now. They're 1-3. Syracuse, congratulations, 34-21 win. But I told you, hey, I'm skeptical of Clemson as a 17.5-point favorite over anybody right now. And that felt like taking money from anybody who's watched Clemson play. Syracuse has the ability to score. And I just don't understand what the thought process was there, that they were that big of a favorite. But to me, Clemson is no longer an elite team. I like Dabo. I like the Clemson fan base. They had an incredible run. This season has ended that run. Even last year, they had incredible success, but they have not been able to keep it rolling. And so to me, I look at the ACC as a two-bid league, FSU and Miami. Now, there may be other teams that rise up, but right now that is not a difficult call. Texas Tech. Give credit to my guy, Cody Campbell, long-form interview we did a couple of weeks ago. Encourage you to go check it out on the OutKick YouTube channel. They absolutely dominated on the road against Utah, and I think the money that Cody Campbell spent on the offensive line in particular is showing itself. Texas Tech looks like the best team in the Big 12, and I would suspect that Texas Tech, if you told me right now who's going to be the playoff team coming out of the Big 12, I think it's Texas Tech. Let's talk about this Oklahoma-Auburn game. Do we have the SEC announcing that they got this game completely wrong and had an officiating error? They allowed a touchdown to be scored on a play that should have. You can pull this up, guys. This is the official statement from the Southeastern Conference. They allowed a touchdown to be scored against Auburn on a deceptive play where a guy looked like he was running off the field, instead stayed lined up on the far left, if you were watching this on television, of the formation near the bench, was uncovered, ran, scores basically a 24-yard touchdown. And in a game that was this close, it was hugely important. Now, Auburn got sacked 9 times. I think the officiating played into the game here, but I think Oklahoma was the better team. They had the better quarterback in John Mateer replacing Jackson Arnold. I think that Oklahoma was the better team in this game. But this is an inexcusable error. And if this is clearly visible, as it should be to the officiating team, here's what I would say. You review every single touchdown automatically to make sure that it's a touchdown. How in the world is it not reviewable to say this, if it's clearly an error, as the league is saying now, how is it not reviewable to say that touchdown should have never been on the board? Because a 15-yard penalty here doesn't just take off 7 points, it potentially knocks Oklahoma completely out of field goal range. Now, again, all of the sacks, Jackson Arnold holds the ball too long. I think Oklahoma is the better team. But in a 7-point game where Auburn had a lot of chances to make plays, I can see why, if you're an Auburn fan, you're sitting back and saying, this is a big story. And by the way, do we have the SEC yearly opponents ready? This was supposed to come out tomorrow night. Credit to Chris Lowe at On3, who broke this first. Guys, this was definitely intended to try and take away from the attention that would otherwise have been given on the error of officiating. And we're going to pull this up. This is all the yearly opponents. I don't think it's coincidental. They were going to announce this live on the television Tuesday night. Instead, it leaks on Monday morning, such that I would imagine most of the conversation surrounding college football outcomes has shifted from the officiating error that I just talked about with all of you to, instead, yearly opponents. So the outrage gets shifted. Here's what stands out to me about the yearly opponents up on the screen in front of you right now. First of all, this is 100% the right decision. So before we get into the analysis, I've been arguing for this for a long time. 9 games starting next year in conference, 100% the right decision. 3 yearly rivals, 6 rotating opponents. It means every 2 years, every SEC team will play every other SEC team, and every 4 years, a home and home will be played. This is 1,000,000,000% the right solution. And I always say this to my team. I always say this to my kids. It's a good life lesson. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Is it a perfect solution? No. Is it a really good one? Yes. So Greg Sankey, the SEC, they got this 100% right. On the matchups, a lot of attention. There is no LSU-Alabama yearly game. This has turned into one of the best games in the SEC, bar none. The fact that that is not happening is probably going to get the most attention. Second most attention, and guys in studio, you can let me know if I'm missing something that everybody is talking about. Second most attention is going to go with Tennessee drawing Alabama, Kentucky, and Vanderbilt. People say, oh, how is this possible? Kentucky and Vanderbilt, who knows how good they're going to be. They tried to balance good and bad out. The reality is Kentucky's top rival, in the opinion of Kentucky fans, if you said, who is your top rival in the SEC, they would say Tennessee. If you ask Tennessee fans, I think Tennessee fans, depending on their age, would say either Alabama or Florida. Younger guys would say Florida. Older guys would say Alabama. Like, I'm squarely in the middle there. I kind of hate both those schools, candidly. Kentucky would say Tennessee's their top rival, and Vanderbilt would definitely say Tennessee's the top rival. Tennessee would not say either Kentucky or Vanderbilt are the top rival. But I do think if you're going to be setting up a yearly football challenge, rivals, 3 of them, the number one thing you should consider is every school should get their first-round draft pick of who they think their rival is. And I think Kentucky said, we want Tennessee. And I think Vanderbilt said, we want Tennessee. I think Tennessee said, we're happy to play those 2, but we also want Alabama. I think in the wash here, it's all going to even out because you play every team every 2 years, and you go home and road every 4 years. So I think the yearly rivals matter, but I think the yearly rivals, and this is set for 4 years, are not going to matter as much when it comes to competitive fairness when every other year you play the entire conference. Some years you're going to get a good draw because the team you expect to be really good is not going to be as good. A team you expect to be bad may end up being good. But overall, if you're playing 9 conference games, I think it will reveal itself. So this is not, to me, coincidental. I think this came out on this morning instead of tomorrow because they wanted to change the conversation. Props to Michigan. This is one I got wrong. Nebraska, one of the great legendary programs of college athletics. I looked at this stat, and I could not believe it. Nebraska has lost since 2016 29 straight games against top 25 opponents. If you went back to the 1990s and the Tom Osborne era at Nebraska, and you said Nebraska, which is one of the gold standard programs of college football, is basically going to stop to exist as a big program, most people in the 1990s wouldn't have believed it. I bet on Nebraska. I thought y'all were going to get it done in Lincoln. I was wrong. Thought for you to contemplate as we think about why Nebraska has fallen off. Is this what happens when you pick the wrong conference? And I don't mean pick the wrong conference for money, because the Big Ten has made Nebraska a lot of money. But if you talk to Nebraska Cornhusker fans, would they rather play Texas, Texas A&M, Missouri, Arkansas? Would they rather play those teams, or would they rather play Washington, Oregon, Rutgers, Maryland? I think Nebraska's in the wrong cultural conference. I think that Nebraska actually should be in the SEC. I don't think it's ever going to happen. But if you look historically, Nebraska recruited, did I mention Oklahoma as a team certainly that Nebraska would rather play? Nebraska recruited by going south. It's a small state that doesn't produce a ton of elite athletes. They went down to Texas, they went down to Oklahoma, and they were able to get dudes from those states. Where do they recruit now? What's the best rival that Nebraska has in the Big Ten geographically? Iowa? Now, I would argue with you, and again, Nebraska fans can tell me if I'm wrong. I would argue with you that Nebraska would rather play Texas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Texas A&M, and Arkansas, 5 SEC teams, before they would rather play Iowa. Am I wrong here? Nebraska fans, we'll clip this, we'll share it. I may even talk about it on the show tomorrow. Am I wrong here? In other words, taking money, I think, actually has accelerated and exacerbated the decline of the Nebraska program because they make a lot of money in the Big Ten, but they're not able to go recruit players that would be excited about playing against. I mean, I think there's a strong argument here. And Nebraska fans, y'all can tell me if I'm wrong. I think there are 5 SEC teams that the average Nebraska fan would rather play every year than, geographically speaking, Iowa. Who else am I missing? Minnesota? Come on, that's not a rival. Wisconsin? Not a rival. Michigan? I mean, it's a cool game because you have 2 big brands, but Nebraska and Michigan are very different. In other words, culture matters, and to me, the culture disconnect here is significant, worth keeping in mind. In fact, I'm going to star this as a potential topic to discuss on some of the pratfalls of conference realignment. And by the way, this can run in multiple directions. Missouri should be playing Kansas every year, different conferences. I think Oklahoma and Oklahoma State should be playing every year, different conferences. I think there are challenges sometimes with these big rivals, and the fact that they're no longer taking place, I think is to the worst of college football, in my always humble opinion. But Nebraska, I can't believe that stat. I think it's worth thinking about how that happened. Indiana, public apology. I think we overemphasized a lot of coaches in college football, and we have not talked enough about Kirk Cignetti. 15-2 since he took over Indiana. They beat Illinois 63-10. 63-10. Top 10 Illinois. Now, Illinois should have never been ranked in the top 10. Fraudulent position. They beat Western Michigan. They beat Western Illinois. They beat Duke, and they're a top 10 program? People talk about inflated rankings. Illinois this year, I think, is exhibit A of inflated rankings. But I think we've underrated Kirk Cignetti. And I think we should have talked about him more in the offseason. I think we should have talked about more about what he's done with Indiana. I love college football. I haven't talked enough about the Hoosiers. That's on me. You know who we talked about too much? Bill Belichick. I'll tell you about Belichick in a sec. But first, can we dive in here and tell you we won again in Prize Picks? I gave you a pick out Thursday. Daniel Jones, more passing yards. I said that Josh Allen was going to have a couple of touchdowns, and they gave us a free square for Patrick Mahomes. I've given you 3 picks now for the NFL in Prize Picks. We've won 2 of them, nearly 5-1. If you aren't signed up and playing Prize Picks, you're wasting your life. Maybe not, but you're wasting yourself from being able to have a lot of fun. You go to prizepicks.com, use code OutKick right now. When you play $5, you get $50 back. You can play in California. You can play in Texas. You can play in Georgia. I'm going to be in Georgia this weekend for the big game between Alabama and Georgia down in Athens. All of that, I'm going to be meeting whoever won our big OutKick giveaway for the prize. So in addition to the game and the hotel and the travel, you get to meet me. How could life be better? That's going to be going on. But go to prizepicks.com, code OutKick right now. You play $5, pick more or less 2 to 6 players, and you get $50. $5 turns into $50. Prizepicks.com, code OutKick. Okay, Bill Belichick. I'm scrolling it down to talk about this on the FS1 discussion too. Bill Belichick's team got destroyed by Central Florida. Belichick has now been beaten soundly by TCU and Central Florida, the only two teams that he has played in a Power 4 conference. Neither game was remotely close. Going into the bye week, North Carolina's 2-2, and the story is over. Team, pull the stats on Belichick without Brady. I just think Belichick is a really good coach who happened to get the greatest quarterback in the history of football. Without Brady, Belichick, none of us would have ever heard of him. And that was one of the top debates we had back in the day, Brady versus Belichick, who's more responsible for the Patriot dynasty. I think now that Belichick has left the Patriots and now that he is in at North Carolina, you're seeing that Belichick, none of us would ever have known his name if he hadn't happened to end up with Tom Brady. And I think that's becoming even truer in college football, where, frankly, North Carolina doesn't look very good. But look at some of the places where guys have gone in and won. Indiana. Indiana for the Big Ten is a lesser job, I think, than North Carolina is in the ACC. That is, North Carolina with Mac Brown had a lot more success than Indiana with anybody. Kurt Cignetti goes into Indiana 15-2, 2 years, immediately turns around that program. Belichick probably going to go, 6-6 with North Carolina. Not much different than what they fired Mac Brown for doing. North Carolina, not recruiting at an incredibly elite level. This is not a Nick Saban situation where they lost to Louisiana Monroe in year one. Yeah, but Saban also signed the number 1 overall recruiting class in America. I just think the Bill Belichick story with Jordan Hudson on the sideline has turned into a complete and totally different story overall. And I'll talk about this in earnest tomorrow on our FS1 show, but good recruit. This is per ChatGPT. I need to recruit Adam to be my fact guy for the show tomorrow. So let's see if we can hopefully get this right. Brady, 249-75 overall, 6 Super Bowls. Without Brady, 70-93 overall, no championships. Belichick is a below mediocre NFL coach without Tom Brady. With him, he is a 6-time Super Bowl champ. Without him, he basically is not good enough to be able to keep his job. And so that is the reality. Okay. So that is my take on Bill Belichick. Let me keep going through. This is our college football breakdown. Missouri gets the win over North Carolina. Lenore Sellers in 2 plays gets an 18-yard sack that he should not have taken. Next play hits a 34-yard pass play, 33-yard pass play on a throw that I'm not sure anybody else could make. But South Carolina now is the first SEC team to me to officially be out of the playoff mix that we thought might be a playoff contender. And now the question is going to be, what kind of spoiler can they be? How will South Carolina perform going forward? Missouri, on the flip side, I think they have real issues in the secondary, having watched multiple of their games. I think they're going to have to outscore teams. I don't think they're good enough to be a playoff contender, but that game against Alabama, circle it, the Tide have got a lot of challenges, including Vanderbilt coming to town, likely to be 5-0. Missouri gets to 4-0, likely to be undefeated when Alabama comes to town as well. Let's see. We already did the top 10. Arkansas. Let's get the SEC power rankings up if we can. I believe we have a graphic, I think, of the top 16 in the SEC. I don't know how Arkansas Razorback fans do it now. Arkansas to lose in the facets in which Arkansas loses. I've got them right now at 15. They were up 28-10 on Memphis. They fumbled with around a minute to go, setting up to win on a last-second field goal. And then they gave up a 3rd and 8 backup quarterback draw where it just looked like they didn't have the heart to make the stop. I feel bad for Razorback fans. I wonder if we're officially into John Gruden countdown. And you look there. I've got Vanderbilt still as my best team. I've got Oklahoma second best, Texas A&M third, LSU 4, Georgia 5. Then I've got Tennessee at 6. Those two teams look very even to me. Big game. Georgia obviously hosting my 7, Alabama. That Alabama win over Wisconsin doesn't look as good since Maryland went on the road and dominated Wisconsin. Mississippi State, undefeated, I think should be ranked. I've got them at 8 because they beat Arizona State. Solid win there. Ole Miss, I've got at 9. Then I've got Missouri at 10. You can argue they're underrated. We'll see. Auburn at 11. Big game for Auburn on the road against A&M. Tons of big games this weekend. And then in the 12 spot, I've got Texas. Just not sold on Texas. I've got South Carolina, like we said, already 2 losses, then Kentucky, then Arkansas, then the Florida Gators. Okay, couple of other things. I was on the road over the weekend in Michigan, up in northern Michigan at Mackinac Island, beautiful place. And I was talking to the Michigan Republican Party. And Kristi Noem was speaking there, also Chris Lasavita. And here is something I shared. This is me at the rostrum speaking yesterday about talking with my 3 boys and the conversation I had with them in the wake of the death of Charlie Kirk. Here is what that sounded like from Friday night. We were live on the air. Charlie's got a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. And some of you may have seen that night I was on with Sean Hannity, and I was angry, and I'm still angry because they killed him. They murdered him in cold blood because they spent a decade saying that Donald Trump was Adolf Hitler, that everybody who voted for Donald Trump, you, me, and everybody out there, is a Nazi, that we're fascists. They repeated that so many times. This is what happens sometimes when you're brave enough and courageous enough to actually say exactly what you think. That scares people. That really scares the biggest cowards in the world. Because if you really disagreed with Charlie Kirk, when they killed him, there was an open mic directly in front of him that would have allowed anyone who disagreed with him on any subject under the sun to show up and argue against him and prove that his argument wasn't as strong as theirs. And they couldn't do it. And so instead, they decided they had to kill him. And I said to my boys, this is what terrorism is. They're not just trying to kill Charlie Kirk. They're trying to scare every single one of us from saying what we know to be true as well. And I told my boys, I said, what I would ask you to do as you get older is the exact same thing I'm going to do. I'm not going to change a damn thing. Thanks to the Michigan Republican Party for having me up to speak there. Yesterday, I watched a lot of NFL, of course, but I have to give a prop to Erica Kirk. She was absolutely incredible. And Erica Kirk spoke, and the part of her address that I found the most compelling was when she talked about Charlie's desire to talk to young men and the fact that she forgave the young man who had assassinated her husband. This was unbelievably touching, unbelievably difficult. She did a phenomenal job. Watch.
My husband, Charlie, he wanted to save young men just like the one who took his life. That young man. On the cross, our Savior said, "Father, forgive them, for they not know what they do." That man, that young man, I forgive him. I forgive him because it was what Christ did and is what Charlie would do. The answer to hate is not hate. The answer we know from the gospel is love, and always love. Love for our enemies and love for those who persecute us.
All right. So well done by Erica Kirk. I encourage you to go watch the entire speech there. Couple of different things also. I'll talk a little bit more about the Jimmy Kimmel situation. I don't think it's been resolved yet. But I do think the NFL connection, which I talked about on Jesse Waters last week, I talked about on this show, this is about something way bigger than Jimmy Kimmel. The Disney company desperately needs the Trump administration to okay their purchase of the NFL Network. I think a lot of people are missing the Jimmy Kimmel dispute. Look, I've already said it. I would not fire Jimmy Kimmel over something that he said on his show, even if I disagree with it. But unless you stood up when Roseanne Barr was fired, unless you stood up when Gina Carano was fired, that's at Disney. Unless you stood up when we saw the situation with Megyn Kelly. But Disney in particular, unless you stood up and said no on Roseanne, unless you stood up and said no on Gina Carano. Gina Carano was on The Mandalorian, the most popular show streaming on Disney at the time, Disney Plus, and Roseanne was on the most popular sitcom produced by Disney at the time. Both of them were fired for what they said off air, not even on the ABC network. I believe that none of them should be fired, but if all of that happened, then to me this is significant. And this is Cenk Uygur talking about with C-SPAN. I know my profile is growing now when guys are on C-SPAN like, hey, Clay Travis said, but there are people on the left that are right on this issue too. In that I think Greg Gutfeld has also come out and he was on the right side of this, meaning I'm against cancel culture for things that people say, even when I disagree with their political commentary. Here is Cenk talking about that on C-SPAN.
I was always against cancel culture, and so was my co-host Anna, right? So when they went to cancel Megyn Kelly, for example, because she said something about blackface, what we said is Al Roker was really upset about that, and there's nothing wrong with being upset about that, but why don't you guys get together, Al Roker and Megyn Kelly, you're both working at NBC News, and do an hour-long special and talk it out. And Al can explain why blackface is offensive. I bet tons of people in this country have no idea why it's offensive. And then Megyn can give her perspective and the country can grow and heal from it. Instead, we got cancel, cancel, cancel. So I was always against it, and we've been principled from day one. Seeing now some on the right, like Clay Travis, being principled about it, and Greg Gutfeld and all the other guys that I listed, it's a bomb for the wounded whole, to make the wounded whole, as Martin Luther King once said.
All right. By the way, guys, will you look in to see if this is true or not? I know we're live on the air, so I'm supposed to go on Will Cain's show here in about 30 minutes, and I just got a text that Disney has announced that Jimmy Kimmel's show is coming back Tuesday, or at least there are reports out there. Can you guys confirm whether that's true or not? Obviously, I'll be talking about it on Fox News, but I'm live on the air, so I can't check on that. If it's true, I mean, what I would suggest is Jimmy should have way more Trump voters and Trump supporters on his show, and that is just a no-brainer to me. I think if your desire is to appeal to the entirety of the public, you can't only be like Stephen Colbert and like The View and like, frankly, Kimmel. You can't only have people of the left on your program. That should be a basic decision. Beyond a shadow of a doubt to me. All right, I'm going to respond. We got some hate mail, and you guys like hate mail more than anything, and I got to be honest with you. I get a lot of positive feedback, and I appreciate all the nice things people say. The negative things actually make me laugh the most. This was from Paul, and Paul said on Instagram, and I shared this, "You want a civil war? It's coming. You fucking Nazi, he said fascist. I think he meant fascist. Fascist fuck. protect your family and move to Alaska. Protect your family and move to Alaska. Now, look, I have never been to Alaska. I would like to go on vacation there at some point in time. Not really a cold weather guy. But this is emblematic of the hate that I get. It all comes from the far left. And I don't want a civil war, for the record. And by the way, if there were a civil war, I don't think that it would go very well for a lot of effeminate white dudes for Harris. Just saying. If you had dudes who were going to be in a big fight, right, who would you want on your side? The white dudes for Harris or the dudes for Trump, white, black, Asian, and Hispanic? Who do you think can bench press more weight? Who do you think is more likely to pick someone up and throw them? A Trump voter or a Kamala voting dude? To say nothing of the fact that Trump won substantial majorities of the male vote overall. I don't think a civil war would go well for Democrats. Just saying. So I don't want a civil war, but I think if we had to break down who's more physically dominant, if only people who could bench press their body weight could vote, Trump would win the election like 90-10, okay? 90% to 10%. So I don't think the white dudes for Harris are in a very good position here. I thought I looked good. Can we get a still shot of me speaking? Do we have a still shot of me speaking up at in Mackinac Island for my event? I thought I looked good. I rarely wear a tie. I got dressed up, wore a tie, probably was overdressed. And I got this email from Robert. Your tie on Fox TV 919. What a terrible selection of ties for your Fox appearance tonight. Why do you always need to, quote, jazz it up? Looked like some kind of candy. Your recent selection of sports coats is appreciated, but tonight it looked like a cheap suit. Look at what the other two guys were wearing. Smooth lines. You got to do better on the suit quality and accessories, Clay. Come on, be a man with some class, Robert Blake. The amount of emails that I get from old dudes upset about what I wear is legion. And I thought my tie actually looked good. I even had my wife, I said, hey, I'm going to let you pick out the tie. I went back and I looked. I will go to war for this tie. That was an elite look from me. Robert's wrong. Dawn emailed, goodbye. No longer a listener. Shame on you. Sent from my iPhone. Now, I don't have a problem. My entire career, I've been getting emails from people saying, goodbye, I'm never going to listen again. And yet every day and every week and every month, my audience is bigger than it was when I started online with an audience of 0 in 2004. So I just don't buy that Dawn is actually going to leave and that she's no longer a listener, and shame on me. But I would say this, how in the world, candidly, how in the world are you going to take the time to send me an email and not even tell me what I should be ashamed of or what I did that made you not a listener anymore? Now, I'm not going to care, candidly, but could you please just be a little bit more specific about why you've ceased to listen to the radio? By the way, radio show is rolling. Audience was up 25% this year over last spring. And is setting, or last spring, summer. So continuing to set new records, but I appreciate the fact that Dawn is not going to be a part of that group. Also, this is true. Jimmy Kimmel coming back on Tuesday. So Jimmy Kimmel's show will be back tomorrow. We'll see what he says then. That is a news alert. And so all of the unprecedented reaction to Jimmy Kimmel going up in smoke. We'll see how that goes. And I'm sure we'll talk about that tomorrow. All right. DBAP, unless you need to SBAP, I'm going to finish this show. I'm going to be on with Will Kane here in a few minutes talking about Jimmy Kimmel coming back on the air. I appreciate all of you, and I will see you tomorrow on the program.